Hello and welcome back to FatbossTV. It is that time again, raid testing has started out of nowhere, and today we're looking at Ursoc in the Emerald Nightmare.
Yes, and before we talk about Ursoc, can I just say how cool the Emerald Nightmare looks?
Yeah,
it is very cool. It's nice going from green to just red. They're just throwing fucking knives at a dartboard and there's like, okay, that land on red. We're doing a red dungeon this time, and it does look very, very cool. And so does Ursoc, a big old bear covered in spiny, red, horrible corruption. It's awesome.
So we're not completely sure where this boss is placed within the instance, but it appears that it's an encounter that you'll be doing a lot earlier than the others. It's an incredibly simplistic fight, but it did feel very, very overtuned while we were testing it, and as a result, we didn't actually get footage of Enrages. But with the footage we do have, you can still get a really good idea of how the fight works.
Now, this fight feels very similar to Butcher in Hymal for a few reasons. One, it is a DPS check, as the boss has got an Enrage mechanic. Well, it kind of has a couple of Enrage mechanics. And two, it has an annoying knockback followed by a charge.
So let's talk abilities. For tanks, you have to deal with two debuffs for the entire fight, Rend Flesh and Overwhelm. Rend Flesh just deals a large amount of damage on impact and then just leaves a nasty dot for 12 seconds, and that's it. However, Overwhelm also does a large amount of damage on application, but instead leaves a debuff that reduces your armor by 20% for 12 seconds. But importantly, the debuff also increases the amount of damage you take from Rend Flesh by 250%, and this particular debuff stacks. As a result, you can't have both debuffs at the same time, otherwise Rend Flesh is going to completely annihilate you. So what you need to do is have one tank taunt for Overwhelm, and one tank to taunt for Rend Flesh. However, you can't take Overwhelm for the entire fight safely because your armor is just going to be severely reduced, so you are forced to switch roles at some point. And this is pretty difficult to do because you can't really do it at a certain stack. There are just certain intervals within the fight where the boss will just stop doing his Rend Flesh and will stop doing his Overwhelm and will just cast several abilities in a row, giving you enough time to at least drop one of the debuffs, and then you can swap tanking roles.
So say the boss just casts loads of abilities and the Rend Flesh's tank Rend Flesh drops, he can then take the next Overwhelm and then the other tank can take the other Rend Flesh. So you can just switch at those sort of intervals. It kind of just happens on the fly, so you kind of need to be a bit dynamic about it. I'm sure boss timers will carry the hell out of this, but at least right now we kind of had to guess and go along with it. Now, the main ability that the boss casts is something called Focus Gaze, and this is your Butcher charge combo with a slight twist. Now, the boss will place a debuff on a target for 6 seconds, and once his 6 seconds is up, he will charge towards them and deal a large amount of damage. The further the player is stood away from the boss, the less damage he will take from this initial charge. So the idea is, you run the fuck away. However, once the boss reaches that player and deals damage to him, he'll do a massive amount of damage to everyone in the entire raid. However, this damage is reduced by having players get hit by the charge as the boss charges towards his fixated target. Now, if you are hit by the charge, it will deal damage to you and knock you back. But on top of that, it will leave a debuff that increases the amount of damage you take from the charge by 500% for 50 seconds. Now, this boss casts this fixate and charge combo more frequently than every 50 seconds, so therefore you will need to set up 2 groups in order to deal with it. So how it works is that when the first player is fixated, they will run as far away as possible, and then you'll get half of the raid stand in the path of the charge, so that when the boss flies towards his fixated target, half of them will be hit by the charge. The next time it comes around and the second player is fixated, we repeat the process. That player fucks off as far away as they can, and then we'll have the other half of the raid get hit by the charge. That way, the third time it comes around, the first set of people can do it again. So it just goes Group A, which is half of the raid, and Group B, which is half of the raid. Group A, Group B, Group A. You just keep rotating between those two people, so you never just get one hit by the charge. This ability did a ton of damage.
Yeah, it did way more damage than what it was supposed to. At least that's how it felt. The damage reduction that players did to the ability by standing within the charge felt very, very minimal.
Yeah, we had like half the raid get hit, and it was like, okay, what happens if we put everyone in it? And it did like the same amount of damage.
Yeah. And then we did one pull where no one got hit by the charge.
And we all just instantly died.
We all instantly died, but there was a barrier down, and the people within the barrier did actually survive.
Yeah.
So I think that's where the scaling's wrong with this ability.
Yeah.
It feels like the amount of people in there a little insignificant.
Yeah, it just needs to make it so each player reduces the ability by more. That's what needs to be tuned.
That is the issue with that ability. It is, however, important that players, even if you're not going to be hit by the charge, that you are always close to the boss because of an ability called Roaring Cacophony. Now, when the boss casts this ability, he'll do a massive amount of damage split between all targets within 20 yards, and if there's only, say, 4 or 5 targets within 20 yards of the boss, it's likely that they're going to take a massive hit and maybe even die. So because of this, we just decided to have everyone in the entire raid right next to the boss so that the damage was nice and spread. Very shortly after this damage goes out, he will also spawn like a puddle of purple shit that has like a phantom bear that appears now and then within the middle of it. Now this puddle does ticking damage if you're stood inside it, but it also replicates the roar ability itself. However, if you get hit by this roar, you're also feared, which is a little bit strange because you can completely avoid this roar because the puddle doesn't move, it stands completely still, and providing you're more than 20 yards away from it, you don't get hit. So
yeah, you just outrange it.
So yeah, it just seems a little bit odd. I guess it's just to prevent you from stacking puddles or something.
Probably, that actually makes sense, yeah. They're probably doing it for that.
So how it works is that each time the boss roars, we just simply moved him around the edges of the room. But one important thing to note about this roar is that each time he does it, it increases the damage of the next roar by 10%, and this stacks permanently, which means towards the end of the fight, this ability is absolutely going to destroy your raid. This pretty much is the main Enrage mechanic on the fight. On top of that, the puddles don't ever seem to despawn, meaning that if the fight is going on for too long, it's likely that you're going to run out of room. And he also has a frenzy at 30% that increases his damage and attack speed by 20%.
Yeah, and I think it's probably going to be similar to a Butcher in Rage, where it said it's his attack speed, but that actually meant the whole fight accelerated by like an X amount of percent.
So the abilities will be coming out far quicker.
Yeah, so I imagine the Enrage, the frenzy is going to be pretty vicious. But yeah, that's actually it.
Yeah, that's all there is to this encounter. Like we said, it is a very simple fight. There is not a lot to it. It doesn't really require that much coordination either. It's very simple. One group gets hit by the charge, the other group gets hit by the charge, and tanks you need to swap when you can and move the boss away from puddles.
Yeah, it's a bit weird. One thing I don't like about it is that he does 2 roars, one after another directly. So what he does a charge, then once he comes back from a charge, he'll do 1 roar, and then like 5 seconds later, he'll do another. And that's really awkward because the boss movement, because he's such a big motherfucker, he moves quite awkwardly anyway. So dragging him out of a puddle while like taunt switching for the debuffs as well is a little bit like fiddly.
Yeah.
And it isn't particularly nice. So sometimes in order to get close to the boss, you have to like stand in front of it, and it just feels not very clean. So hopefully if you maybe spread out those roars, it'll be maybe a bit more dynamic, because it's pretty much nothing happens. Charge, roar, roar. Nothing happens.
Yeah.
Charge, roar, roar. So yeah, it'd be nice if they maybe spice it up a bit.
And the damage, of course, on that charge ability, the end part of the charge where it hits the entire raid, is dealing way too much damage.
In the end, we just brought 5 healers. Well, 5 characters who actually had healing characters. So yeah, it was crazy.
Yeah, that's all we got time for in this video. If you did enjoy this little preview, then please do drop us down a like. And of course, there will be a guide, an official FatBoss guide, once these bosses do hit live servers. So make sure you subscribe to get notifications of when they're up. And we'll see you in the next video.
Thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching.